Hey guys, I have been a Challenger player for the last 4 sets, and with set 8.5 released just a few days ago, I have released a brand new flex guide for patch 13.6. So just a brief overview first. Right now in the current meta, I think admin is a bit overtuned and it benefits Warwick the most. Warwick already has built-in Omnivamp, so if you end up comboing the right combination of admin stats on him and Hacker, you essentially just end up with a unit with 5 full items worth of stats in your opponent's backline, making him being able to 1v9 their entire team. And the fact that Warwick has the ability to stabilize at level 7 is really powerful because you only actually need 1 copy of Warwick. Hacker right now is extremely rampant in the current meta, so any comp that uses a lot of backline units just get run over because Warwick exists. There are a couple of Exodia comps in the current meta. Like I said earlier, one is Warwick. If you get the right combo of admins, Warwick is almost always a free top 4. DRAVEN is really good if you get the right augment and if you hit 3-star DRAVEN. And because DRAVEN leverages Hacker just as well as Warwick, DRAVEN is always going to be really strong in the current meta. Vex reroll is really good, but is also dependent on you hitting the Vex 3. This is also another Exodia comp that is really strong. And 2 other comps that are really good are going to be Anima +1 and LASERCORPS +1, which essentially relies on you getting a spat or the augment that gives you a +1 to the trait. There are other comps that are pretty good that are top 4 comps. Vertical Duelists are always pretty consistent because they stabilize so well early and mid game. You essentially just bleed out late game, but you always end up with a 3rd or 4th because the Warwick and DRAVEN players just kill everyone off once they hit their god comps. JHIN Viego is pretty good, but this is a pretty high roll comp just because if you only have JHIN 1, you get run over by Warwick. So you end up needing to roll at level 8 for this comp because you need 2-star JHIN, 2-star Viego, and you need to hit Leona as well. Same for TF and NEEKO. You need to hit Janna, you need to hit TF2, and you need to hit NEEKO 2 to contest these Exodia comps. So that's my brief overview. Now I'm going to go right into the comp guide. So the first comp I'll be talking about is Warwick. So Warwick is really strong in the current meta right now just because of admin comboed with Hacker, comboed with Warwick's built-in Omnivamp just gives you a raid boss unit with like 5 units worth of stats. For Warwick, one of the main strengths of Warwick is that he has the ability to stabilize at level 7 because all you really need is 1 Warwick and a fully itemized Warwick to be able to 1v9 their entire team. Very similar to Zed in the previous set, right at the beginning of the patch. Warwick is very similar in how Zed was played. So basically, there are a few really good admins that you want to look out for. The best one for Warwick, in my opinion, is going to be on ally death, admin gets AD. Because Warwick is usually the last one to die, Warwick will almost always be able to clean up after the rest of your unit dies. On ally death, attack speed is pretty good as well. Not as good as AD, in my opinion. The front-loaded stats are really good as well because they enable your Warwick to get the first reset once he jumps into the backline. And the ones that scale your HP are also pretty good, but only if you get them early. The on ability cast heal one is actually pretty good either because it enables Warwick to get some more self-sustain. There are a lot of other variants you can play as well. With Warwick, it's actually pretty flexible because the only unit that matters is Warwick plus the 3 admin units. This variant, you're playing 6 brawlers and 4 admin instead. In this variant, you could also consider dual carrying your Jax or your Riven, depending on if you have itemization for them or if you're close to 3-starring them as well. This is another variant where you're playing around 4 Laser Core instead. This variant gets exponentially stronger if you get the Laser Core +1. So if you get the Laser Core +1, you would be playing around 6 Laser Core instead, assuming you hit the Mordekaiser, and your board will probably look something like this. So on the site it says 5, but if you have the Laser Core, you actually have 6. So one of the strongest comps that you could play that's reroll in the current meta is going to be reroll Vex. So reroll Vex, in my opinion, plays a bit similar to Kaisa, where you need a lot of econ to win out because you end up needing to hit the 3-star Vex and the 3-star Malphite. Otherwise, if you don't hit these, it's probably just going to be a 4th at best. I think the playstyle for Vex is you want to sack early and then roll down for a stable board at 3-2, so 2-star Malphite, 2-star Alistar, 2-star Pyke, 2-star Morgana, 2-star Vex, ideally. And then at level 7, you need to roll down again to hit your 3 Riftwalker Power Spike. You usually want to play this comp with a Mascot +1. That makes this comp way stronger because at level 7, once you hit the double Riftwalker edition with Vex, this gives you the ability to hit 6 Mascot because you just play all the Mascots and then you have that extra Riftwalker +1 to the Mascot. You'll be able to stabilize really hard at level 7, econ back up, and then roll down again later for your 3-star Malphite and your 3-star Vex. This comp gets really strong if you get either the Vex hero augment or the Malphite hero augment. So both of the Vex hero augments are really good. And for Malphite, the Malphite hero augments are good. If you get the one that buffs Malphite, you want to make sure to put 3 tank items on your Malphite. So later on, you have the opportunity to cap out with Nunu. So if you don't have the mascot emblem already, Nunu gives you the 6 mascot, which makes your comp really strong. Otherwise, you just remove this Nasus for your Nunu, and then just play a random legendary unit for your front line. So next up is going to be DRAVEN. So DRAVEN is also a really strong comp in the current meta because DRAVEN, again, is a unit that has a shitload of stats and could also take advantage of the fact that it could use Hacker. So for DRAVEN, DRAVEN, in my opinion, could only really be played if you get either of the DRAVEN hero augments. And if you do, you have some direction, so you could play towards slow rolling for this comp at level 6. There are 2 main variations for DRAVEN. The first variation is going to be Hacker DRAVEN, in which case your board is going to look like this. You slow roll at level 6, and hopefully you want to look for 3-star DRAVEN, Jax, and Wukong. You position like this, and then you just send DRAVEN to the back line. Usually you want to backline your units like this because you make their front line walk up, and then DRAVEN just goes to the back and gets free access onto their back line. Best items on DRAVEN are going to be Last Whisper +2. You generally want 1 damage amplification item on top of Last Whisper and 1 healing. So for example, BT IE is a good combo. You could also go Hodge IE. You could go Gunblade IE. Additionally, the other damage item could be GS as well. It could also be Gwinsu's. The only item you really need is going to be Last Whisper for that armor shred. The other variant is going to be the default variant where you just play around supers instead. In my opinion, this is a bit weaker just because you don't have that backline access with DRAVEN. And you also play around units that are Giga contested, such as Lee Sin, Malphite, and Gangplank. But that sums up the comp guide for DRAVEN. So next up in the meta comp list is going to be Renegade JHIN. So JHIN is a very strong comp, but the problem with JHIN is that it is a very high roll comp, because if you roll at 7 and you don't hit 2-star JHIN, you're basically fucked because you're going to get farmed by half the players in the lobby because they're all playing WARWICK. This comp also gets farmed by DRAVEN as well because DRAVEN just jumps to the back and one-taps your JHIN. You generally want to roll at level 8 for this comp because there are a lot of level 8 units you want to hit. For example, you need 2-star JHIN, you need 2-star Viego as your secondary. If you hit Leona, that'd be really good because you could drop the Silas. If you hit Nunu, you have the opportunity to Rift Walker your Vex instead to get 4 mascot in, assuming you have the Alistar. There are just a lot of different units you could hit, like Janna is good as well, Urgot, Fiddlestick. So for LeBlanc, 1 droppable unit is going to be LeBlanc in case the admin is shit. If the admin benefits your whole team, like gives you attack speed or AP, then you can play the admin. Otherwise, you probably just drop the LeBlanc. If you get a Renegade +1 for this comp, you probably still only want to play 5 Renegade. You just drop the Silas instead. The reason why is because if you play towards 7 Renegade, you are probably going to end up stuck playing with a Silas and a Lucian, which are basically 2 dead units. I think it's more valuable to just play something like a Janna or a Fiddlestick. So the Omega late game cap board for this comp is going to look something like this. You're just going to be playing around 3 Renegade, and then in this variation, because you already have 3 mascots in, you would just Rift Walker the mascot to get 4 mascot. You also have the opportunity of Rift Walking your Renegade as well for 5 Renegade in case you don't want to play this variant. Next comp in the list is going to be Duelists. So Duelists have a very strong early and mid game, but they fall off late game. So this makes Duelists a very good comp to play for top 4. So you know you want to play Duelists if you have like 3 or 4 Duelists early and you have like a chain and a rod and you have Locket. You could just tempo with Locket into stage 3 and then roll down at level 6 at stage 3-2 for a full board like this. Win streak all the way until stage 5, and then at stage 5, once you start getting shit on, you will bleed out to a 3rd or a 4th, which is really good because the Warwick and DRAVEN players end up killing everyone off. So a level 6 board you could roll down for is just going to be 6 Duelists with Lockets on your Nyla. And if you play around Spreadshot Vayne, the best itemization for Spreadshot Vayne is going to be something like this. If you don't have Spreadshot Vayne, you also have the option of playing around your TF as well. So TF is another Duelist in set 8, but for TF, you want to itemize him with AP and attack speed items. So in this variation, you're itemizing your TF instead. So this comp gets a lot stronger if you get a Duelist +1. So if you have a Duelist +1 at level 8, you could play a board like this with an additional frontline unit like Alistar as an Oxforce unit. If you have the Duelist emblem, you can't play 8 Duelists until level 8 because you need to have 8 units on the board. If you have the Duelist +1, then you could play 8 Duelists at level 7, which in my opinion is a bit stronger. So one of the primary AP comps you could play in the current patch is going to revolve around for SPELLSLINGER. So in set 8.5, they removed Talia and they introduced NEEKO, who is a Star Guardian, and TF, who is a duelist. You generally want to dual carry these two units because if you only play around a single one of these SPELLSLINGERs, you won't have enough damage. So this comp is like more of a high roll comp because you need to hit both 2-star NEEKO and TF, and you also need to hit a front line that can survive until they pop off. So you generally want to roll at level 8. The default 6 units you want to play for this comp are going to be Annie, Echo, Alistar, and then you play NEEKO, TF, plus a random SPELLSLINGER. So there are a lot of different variations you can play with this comp. One variation revolves around 6 SPELLSLINGER and 4 Oxforce. This is a level 9 board. However, if you get a SPELLSLINGER +1 or an Oxforce +1, you could play around a board like this at level 8. Another variation you could play revolves around 4 Star Guardians and 4 SPELLSLINGERs. This revolves around you playing around the Janna and the Syndra. And then for the remaining slots, you can just flex around random legendaries you hit, like Urgot and Fiddlesticks. This is going to be probably the board that you are most likely generally going to play around, just because it doesn't require you hitting any extra +1s. But if you do hit any extra +1s, you could try to play towards more vertical synergies. And for example, here you could also play around 6 Star Guardians if you get the Star Guardian +1 as well. So next up is going to be Anima Squad. Anima Squad is basically the same as last set. It's highly dependent on you hitting 3 Anima Squad early just because you want to start farming those fame stacks. Those fame stacks are really important to tempo into late game just because if you don't get that early game fame, it'll cause you to lose a lot of fights mid game that you would have won if you had that fame, which would lead to even less stacks towards the late game and you would just get outscaled. If you do hit the Anima Squad at 2-1, you could consider playing this comp. You could also consider playing this comp if you get the Anima Squad +1 from the augment. And you generally do want to slam items just to ensure that you win those early and mid-game fights. So let's say you had a lot of AD items. That's like an indicator that you should probably be playing around the Vayne. If you have a lot of AP items, you want to slam all your items on Jinx because you need to start farming the fame. And then you transfer over all of the items to MF. So late game, if you have an Anima Squad +1, your board might look something like this instead. And then once you push 9, the turbo late game build is to remove your 2 shitter Anima Squad units and play full legendary units. So you drop down to 5 Anima Squad and play a full legendary board. So one other AP comp you could play is around Heart. There are 2 different ways you can play Heart in the current patch. The first way is around Cleansing Safeguard. In the Cleansing Safeguard variant, at level 6, you want to roll down for a stable board, which usually includes 2 copies of Lee Sin. One is usually 2-star and the other is going to be 1-star because it's very hard to find 6 Lee Sins at level 6. You want to prioritize tank items on both of your Lee Sins, and for your backline items, just blue buff is really good because the more your Heart units cast, the more AP your entire team gets. And as the fight goes on, your Lee Sins will be unkillable because they will keep shielding and Sona will keep healing them back to full HP. If you get a Heart +1, this is the other variation you could play. You could play towards 6 Heart instead. That is the Giga win con for this comp because your comp will just never die and eventually your backline will one-shot their entire team. If you don't have Cleansing Safeguard, but you have the Heart +1, you probably only want to play around 1 copy of Lee Sin. And in the Heart variation with the +1, you just play around Syndra late game and a legendary board. So this sums up my 13.6 flex guide for set 8.5. If you guys enjoyed this video, I would really appreciate it if you guys subscribe to my channel or followed me on Twitch. And there may or may not be a B patch towards the middle of next week. If there is, I'll probably release another flex guide when there's a meta update. Until then, I'll see you guys next time.